we're talking about good old Portland. She's been very naughty lately. Governor Kate Brown announced Wednesday that U.S. agents who were sent to protect a federal courthouse in Portland from demonstrators will begin departing on Thursday. Thursday's come and gone. After my discussions with VP Pence and others, the federal government has agreed to withdraw federal officers from Portland, the Democratic governor said on Twitter. They have acted as an occupying force and brought violence. Starting tomorrow, all Customs and Border Protection and ICE officers will leave downtown Portland. All of them. Every single one of them. This was Ted Wheeler a few days ago. Portland mayor demands immediate meeting with DHS to discuss ceasefire. I don't know who this dipshit thinks he is to make demands, but perhaps that's just the way they worded it. Makes demands. Question being, why would an individual feel like they have the ability to demand a ceasefire? What does he know that we don't, to where, say these meetings happen, and say some agreements are reached between DHS and himself, that he can quickly squash whatever's going on in Portland? What is it that he knows? Since he is the police commissioner of Portland as well, it makes you wonder if some sort of ceasefire were to be negotiated, how quickly would Portland police be told to go out there and clean things up? How quickly would Portland police be sent to the courthouse to get things back to normal? He seems to be suggesting that he has the power to do this, and it's interesting, right? 38, 39 days, didn't do anything. Now all of a sudden he's talking a big game, like he has the ability to squash this thing quickly. As police commissioner, you'd think he would, but good job, Ted. This should have been squashed on day one. Kate Brown again here. Kate Brown's administration says it proved relatively easy in the end, negotiations for the federal troops to leave, because the Trump administration was clearly looking for a way out. Doesn't sound like Trump to me. Trump administration officials did not demand any concessions or pledges from Brown before they agreed officers would depart. Brown's chief of staff, Nick Blosser, told the Oregonian, Oregon Live Wednesday, whatever side you're on, does that sound like Trump? That he would just back down that quickly? Why somebody would try to come off so brazen? And I get it in a way, because the governor is clearly a sympathizer of radicalism. She's definitely in bed with these individuals, so I believe that she's trying to toe the line here. Trying to say, hey, look what we did for you. Please don't hurt our city anymore. But at the same time, it's Trump's fault. But please don't hurt our city, because in the end, you know, these elected officials, they're really cowards at heart to allow this to go on in their city. You know damn well that her, Wheeler, city council members, senators in Oregon, if you let them fend for themselves versus these anarchist type, perhaps far leftist individuals, Black Bloc, ANTIFA, whomever, if you had them fend for themselves without the power of the government behind them, be that state, local, federal, whatnot, you know they'd be shaking in their boots and pissing their pants. In my opinion, that's why she's trying to put this stuff out, to try to pretend like she's strong and try to appease these leftists. However, Fox News, Oregon State Police arrive in Portland in push to stop riots. Okay, interesting. The Oregon State Police on Thursday will take over duties of guarding a federal courthouse in Portland that has become a flashpoint during weeks of riots that have turned violent, which is why it's a riot. The state troopers will not be dressed in riot or tactical gear like the federal agents previously stationed at the Mark O. Hatfield U.S. Courthouse, Police Superintendent Travis Hampton said. It is obvious the current strategy is not sustainable and has a high probability of serious injury or death as officers and the community clash, Hampton said in a statement to Fox. OSP hopes to de-escalate the tensions around the Marco Hatfield courthouse, facilitating free speech and proportional response if criminal activity is observed. That seems to me like that's what we've seen the last few weeks from the feds. Somebody took a non-lethal munition to the dome. I think that was a couple weeks ago. I haven't heard of anybody being killed. Perhaps I'm wrong. Obviously, people have been getting a proportional response for conducting the criminal activity they have. So how is this, what OSP is doing, any different than what the feds are doing? And again, like I said, with Wheeler controlling Portland police, and obviously this would come from Brown in terms of OSP, why didn't this happen on, say, night 2 or 3? I get how the first night something could just break out. Second night maybe, but third, fourth night, Portland police should have squashed this. OSP should have been called in for support as needed. There's no reason why it should have gone on for 39 days or 38, whatever it was, before the feds got involved. And I know all of you get that. Here we've got more from Brown. Look at this. We need to recognize that the protests in Portland are not solely about the federal presence, she said. They started before federal agents descended on our city, and they will likely continue after they leave. Why will they continue? How many police officers do you have on your force? Portland and now state police. You're telling me you can't squash this in one night with a strong show of force? No, it'll go on as long as you allow it to go on. City officials weren't directly involved in the negotiations to have federal officers leave Portland, despite Wheeler and Commissioner Joanne Hardesty publicly asking to be on Monday. We were in heavy conversation by that time, but the city didn't know that, Blosser said. Checkmate. Wheeler and Hardesty, I believe I just said Hardesty, they believe that they had more juice than they really do. They're just a mayor and a commissioner of a town where they allowed damage. How many millions of dollars in damage has been done in Portland? It'll be interesting once all of this is resolved to see what the numbers are. How many businesses were ruined, damage, injuries, arrests, all of that stuff. It'll be interesting to see those final numbers. What's Brown talking about? The governor of Oregon and the Trump administration announced an agreement Wednesday aimed at de-escalating tensions outside the federal courthouse in Portland, where federal agents and protesters have clashed during nightly unrest. As part of the agreement, officials said, most Department of Homeland Security agents would move off what have become the front lines around the courthouse and then withdraw from Portland entirely if the nightly protests cease. If being the key word there. But the specific timing of how this would play out remained unclear. Exactly. Portland, clean up your mess. So you have Brown saying all the things she has, coming out, trying to play politics, trying to play tough, this and that. The feds are tucking tail. It's like I said, you don't have a statement like that and think Trump and the administration won't have a response. In response to all that, President Trump, who wrote on Twitter Wednesday that Portland would be burned and beaten to the ground if federal agents had not been deployed, said that the withdrawal was conditional upon local authorities having imposed sufficient security in that area. You hear all sorts of reports about us leaving. We're not leaving until they've secured their city, Trump told reporters in Washington, labeling the protesters anarchists and agitators, which they are, a description rejected by Oregon officials. We told the governor, we told the mayor, secure your city. Simple enough, right? Even with talk of drawing down federal forces in Portland, Trump, during a visit Wednesday to Midland, Texas, renewed his threat to send National Guard troops to Portland and elsewhere. If they don't solve that problem locally very soon, we're going to send in the National Guard and get it solved very quickly, just like we did in Minneapolis, and just like we will do in other places, he said. They'll either solve that problem or we'll send in the National Guard. Now that's more like the Donnie we know, right? For Trump to not demand any concessions, for Brown to be running her mouth like she did, you can't sit there and say Trump wins them all in terms of like PR and the media and how things are portrayed and everything. But to be letting your city burn for 38, 39 days and to where this kind of federal response is needed, and then to come out and try to act like, and we're talking about Governor Brown, to try to act like you won something over Trump and the feds, nobody's buying that. I think some people on the far left may buy that. These anarchists may think they're winning the Battle of Portland. The reality is, we all know this. Had they did what they're supposed to do to begin with, squash it. They set up the Chaz in Seattle. You see how quickly they squashed it when they wanted to. Asheville and Nashville, I talked about in other videos where they try to set up Chaz's. Squash them quickly. The state and the power they have, they could have squashed this like that. But because they failed to do so, that lets you know what kind of individuals you're dealing with here. Individuals that don't really care about the entire citizenry of their city. Now, fast forward 2 months later, it's all politics, right? Obviously, Trump's poking his chest out like he does. You'd expect that. He's going to take a victory lap on this one, regardless of how it turns out. Then you've got these Oregon officials. They're going to try to take their victory lap. Ted Wheeler's going to complain Trump tucked tail and ran. So the question I have, in finality, and kind of wrap it up on this note, just a little something for all of you to think about. All of these anarchists who are out there, defund the police, BLM, hate of Trump, that's kind of just tertiary things, but defund the police, because that takes them towards their agenda, right? If you can clear a barrier out of the way, which the police are, that would allow those anarchist types, ANTIFA types, to run the city. So if they can take that barrier of police out, which is why they're trying to defund in other cities as well, hello, everybody. Most of us aren't that dumb. There are some people that are, but we all know that there's a hidden agenda behind defunding and abolishing. With Kate Brown sending in OSP, and at some point we'll see what happens in the coming days if there is some sort of drawdown, and if Portland police are activated again, and if Portland police are put in a position to squash these riots. How do the anarchist types, again, Antifa goons, feel about this? They're out there all this time, 2 months. They're out there on Twitter, oh, we're winning the battle, this and that. They're thinking that their local government has their back. That this is what their local government wants. All of a sudden, state police are in there, and it may get squashed in a few days, a week, whatever it may be. How do they then feel towards their own government, a local government, and statewide as well, that they thought that they controlled? Well, Ted Wheeler, Kate Brown, all of the officials in Oregon, if they do end up putting them in their place, that shows them who's really in charge. So how do those individuals feel about that? Like I was talking about with Strong, once individuals get that taste of blood, so to speak, it's hard to kind of draw that back. And they've been running wild for 2 months in Portland. How do you squash that desire, that burning desire within the anarchist soul? What's he going to do now? He's a pathetic scourge who offers nothing to society. Their phony wall of moms, their loser veterans. Get those guys out of here. Most of them probably aren't even real veterans. Get them out of here. How do you get that taste of power, of anarchy, and then go back to your normal pathetic life, whatever that may be? You're going to tell me that they're not going to try to march on Ted Wheeler's house at some point? You're telling me they're not going to try to march on city council members' houses? Or their senators' offices? Or Kate Brown's offices? Whatever? You're telling me they're going to take this lying down? That all this time, this 2 months, they thought they were getting somewhere? And all of a sudden OSP comes in, and if Portland PD is activated, like I said, and squashes this, you tell me they're going to take that lying down? I don't know about that. I mean, we'll see. For as much of pieces of shit they are, I'll give them credit. They got heart, man. As fucked up as the thing is that they believe they're fighting for, they're fighting for it. One final note, though, and I know that's supposed to wrap it up on that, but we've seen that the riots, since they've been breaking out, have started to bolster Trump. The more he takes kind of a heavy-handedness and squashes this stuff because most people don't want to deal with this, the more his numbers start to rise. So my feeling is that this is more political than anything. Let me know what you think about that. If there were a situation where Trump's numbers were continuing to sag, would Oregon's government allow this to continue to happen? Is there some kind of collusion within the Democratic Party saying, hey, this is making Trump look good, let's kind of, let's cut this off right now? All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Take care.